Today, there are over 65 million displaced people around the world. This is not the only time that millions of people have been on the move fleeing persecution and violence. During and after World War II, 40 million people were uprooted, having been targeted due to their religious beliefs, political affiliation, nationality, membership to a social group, or race. In the aftermath of the war, thousands of refugees streamed into America. Unlike today, where refugee resettlement is restricted, between 1949 and 1952, refugees made up half of the immigration into the United States. One of these people has a story of both extreme hardship and enduring hope. Life Resettled seeks to share refugee journeys like hers and remove stigmas around refugees by educating the community. Here is Reva's story.
I am Reva Jolovitz. Well, if you're talking about refugees, their parents were refugees. They ran away from Russia, Romania, and my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, my mother's father, was drafted and fought in the Russo-Japanese War in 1905 and sent to Harbin in Manchuria. And they thought, wow, they were persecuting Jewish people, and we are. And he said, what a place to get away from the Tsar. So they ran to Harbin, where my mother was born in 1907. But my father was born in 1904 in Russia. But when he was 3, his parents also fled, and they went to Shanghai. My mother was raised in Harbin, and my father was 4 years old, and they came to Shanghai. And then later, my mother's family also moved to Shanghai, and they met. So my father, age 14, quit school, got a job in a cigar factory, and he never went back to school. But he took a correspondence course in accounting from La Salle University here, and eventually a lot of different jobs. He worked for Gaumont British Films and for Milk, Glaxo, Klein Milk and all that. He was sent to Hong Kong, where I was born, and spent a lot of time on the beach in Hong Kong. I was born in Hong Kong. Eventually, his job, he went back to Shanghai, where my grandparents were, and eventually I had a sister. She's 8 years younger than I am. And eventually, my father got a good job as chief accountant for the Texas Oil Company, Texaco, for Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, Saigon, Bangkok. But that was in October of 1941. And everybody, the Japanese were pushing, they were invading. We were sent to Hong Kong in 1937 on a British gunboat for 3 months until things died down in Shanghai, then back to Shanghai. But he, in October, was transferred to Manila, Philippines, and he begged my mother. He said, please take the children and go to America. Everybody knew there was a war coming. She said, no, thank God. So he left, and my mother and sister and I, we came on a ship that arrived in Manila on December the 7th, which is Pearl Harbor Day, which was also their 15th wedding anniversary. So we were given housing to live there. We were then stateless in the beginning, and then eventually I was born British because I was born in Hong Kong. That was a British territory. But then eventually, my father and mother became British. They were stateless, refugees. On December the 7th, they bombed Manila. That was December the 8th over there. And my father went to collect our belongings from the ship, blew up, nothing. We had nothing left. There were several people from Texaco, the company, that lived in this little cluster of apartments, but it was too close to the airfields that were being bombed. So we started walking. They thought, well, we're walking, the Americans will be there nearby. So we're walking and we bumped into very old friends of my mother from Harbin. Jack, he owned the biggest bar in Manila. And when we told him where we were going or what, he says, you're out of your minds, you come and stay with us. So they had a house opposite the hospital, Philippine General Hospital. Well, the bombing increased, and eventually we were really the most bombed city in the world, next to, with the beginning of the war and the end of the war, next to Warsaw, Poland. Anyway, the Japanese came in February, but then they entered the city of Manila, and the next day they came to the house. I don't know how they found out, but they came to the house and they said they wanted my mother and father and me for questioning, and we could leave my sister. And so we were taken in a car. A lot of people were taken in trucks. Taken in a car to the stadium, Rizal Stadium in Manila. Everybody said, where are we going? What are we doing? And then they took us to the university, Santo Tomas University. But they let it be used as a camp. And so so there we were. They said, just close for 3 days. And we slept on overturned cupboards and things like that. But after 3 days, after 3 weeks, it didn't look as though we were going to be going anywhere else. And the camp then slowly got the most fabulous organization from people who were interned in the camp. It was like a little city. It was like life in a little city, but upside down, turned upside down. And the most wonderful government school. You should see the school that they made. People were interned who had been teachers, principals, And they said to me, you are 10, you're going into the 5th grade. I said, fine. So, from the 5th grade to January or December of 44, from then on, I don't remember any school. We were too weak from hunger and everything. Starvation got worse and worse and worse and worse. At the end, people were eating anything. And I had the job of, we had a lot of banana trees on the campus, but they take 9 months to mature. Towards the end, we were eating the tree trunk. And it was my job to slice the tree down and bite it to see what we could digest. So I always had a Cheshire cat smile like that from the banana tree trunk. In around September of 1944, they started bombing us, Americans. Bombing got worse and worse. And finally, somebody in the commandant's office, a Japanese, found out he was working for the Americans secretly, that we were all going to be destroyed. So MacArthur turned his plan around and came another way and surprised us. And so all of a sudden, through the gates crashed these American soldiers in tanks. And we were all now sleeping huddled up in the middle, and the windows were taped crosswise in case of bombing. The windows would break, you know. So, and my mother was always afraid of thunder and noise, so she was in a different bed with a mosquito net, and I was in a bed, and all of a sudden we heard this tremendous booms. I grabbed my little sister and I said, "Come with me quickly or Mother will catch us." You know. We ran down the hall of the main building, down the steps. We went out. It had been raining, and I sat on a parapet and got my nightgown all wet. And I thought, oh, my mother's going to kill me, my only nightgown, you know. And then the tanks came in, Georgia Peach, San Antone, and then all of a sudden somebody said, "Look out," the lieutenant, Abiko, walked around with a big sword, and all the kids could tell Abiko's coming because they heard that sword rattling. Abiko stood up ready to throw a grenade at one of the soldiers from the tank stood up and shot him. And the next morning I stepped over his dead body lying in the hall. Couldn't believe it. So we were liberated, but that's when the bombing got really bad. Americans bombing, you know. And my sister got run over, but not killed, thank God, but a big army truck ran over her in front of our eyes. But then we were finally liberated, but she had to travel in a hospital ship. So we got on this ship that had a surgeon on board. We had to travel zigzag because it was still war. And they said on the ship, "Parents, you have to watch your children because if anybody falls overboard, we can't stop." So, but my friends and I, we all slept on deck because it was so hot inside the ship, and the ship would go like that. And we cried when we left the ship. It was a wonderful, over a month it took. And so we came to the States, and then very soon after that, my father went back to the Far East. Mother and sister and I remained, and I went to the 7th, 8th, and 9th grades in San Francisco. In the 10th grade, we went back to Shanghai and went to the Shanghai American School. We had then, I think, applied for citizenship, but we were not citizens. So we were not allowed to come back into America. So we went to Canada in June of my senior year. And further back in time, my father and I had gone to a bookstore in Shanghai to look at colleges for me. So I applied in the 10th grade just as a trial, and that's all I had, because when we had to leave, China was becoming invaded by the communists. We just had to leave, and we couldn't come into America because our number had not come up yet, so we went to Canada. Never laid eyes on Canada.
So,
in January of my senior year, I went to teachers and said, "Could I please have a recommendation for Stanford?" They hardly knew me, you know. But I did get into Stanford. I had to go by myself. All went back to China, to Hong Kong. And I stayed. And then I graduated. They didn't see me. They didn't see me graduate from anything. When I was in graduate school, I had done some teaching and all that. My citizenship came up. So I went to Brooklyn, and there was this huge room with all kinds of people trying to become citizens. fill out on a piece of paper this big every place that you've ever been, and a description of yourself. So I looked at my eyes and I thought, part of it is brown, part of it is orange, part of it is green. So what did I put down? Tweed. And I went back to my seat, sat there, and all of a sudden my name was called out and everybody looked. I mean, this huge room, you know. And I walked up to the desk. I was thinking, what have I done? And he said, lady, what's with the tweed? And I said, well, I wanted to be very accurate. If I were to commit a crime, I would want you to be able to find me quickly. He says, lady, we got black, brown, gray, green, blue. Pick one. I said, well, all right, if you want to be inaccurate, I'll say green. So I got my citizenship papers and became an American. We've been refugees several times, yeah. But we found refuge here.